I was there, in the middle of a monsoon night in central Vietnam, when the scream of a woman tore through the darkness. It wasn't the kind of cry you hear every day. It was jagged, broken, choked with terror, as if every ounce of fear and despair she'd ever felt had been poured into one final breath. And then, it was cut off. Laughter followed. Not the laughter of joy. No, this was warped, rough, soaked in alcohol and dripping with cruelty. Rain hammered against the tin roof of a nearby shack, muffling some of the sounds but not enough. I could still hear every single one. I stood only a few yards away, my M16 clenched so tightly in my hands that my knuckles had turned white. I knew exactly what was happening inside. And I knew I would never forget it. That sound, that helplessness, they became scars I would carry for the rest of my life. That memory wasn't the start of my 457 days in Vietnam, but it became the anchor. The moment that would always pull me back to the war no matter how many years passed. To understand how I got to that point, how I lost that piece of myself, we have to go back to the beginning, to the days when I still believed I was the light in the darkness. I grew up in a small Midwest town where everyone knew each other and waved on the street. My father was a mechanic, my mother a grade school teacher. I came of age in a time when the news was filled with talk about the spread of communism across Asia. By the time I graduated high school, I was 19. I believed Vietnam was the front line, that if communism took hold there, it would keep spreading. And I believed it was my duty to help stop it. I enlisted in the spring. Basic training was brutal. Long runs under a scorching sun, hours of weapons drills until my shoulders ached. But whenever I felt worn down, I pictured myself coming home in uniform, welcomed like a hero. In political briefings we were told that the Viet Cong were the darkness, and we, the light. I believed that story. I had no idea that just months later, I'd realize how thin that line between light and darkness really was, so thin that it could vanish with a single scream on a rainy night. We landed in Da Nang on a blistering morning. The heat wrapped around me like a heavy, wet blanket, sweat breaking out instantly. The air was thick with the smell of smoke, engine oil, and something musky I couldn't name. Trucks ferried us from the airstrip. Through the window, I saw red dirt roads cutting through endless green rice paddies. Here and there, small clusters of children waved at us, smiling. I waved back, thinking they were happy to see us. We passed thatched huts, women balancing water buckets across their shoulders, old men sitting on doorsteps with unreadable eyes. It was a world completely different from my hometown. At the base, the commanding officer was brief and sharp. Anyone could be the enemy. Always stay alert. His words lodged in my mind, but the image of those smiling children stayed with me longer. I thought I'd be protecting those smiles. I didn't know yet. One day I'd watch them vanish in blood and smoke. The first few weeks were quiet. Our orders were to patrol the nearby villages, watch for Viet Cong activity. By day, the sun roasted us inside our flak jackets. By night, mosquitoes swarmed in black clouds. Sometimes the villagers would offer us coconuts, bananas. I still remember the smell of fresh cooked rice, the sound of kids laughing when we tried out a few Vietnamese words. Through our interpreter, they thanked us for keeping them safe. I believed them. I believed we were bringing peace. But who could have guessed that just a few months later, the same hands that took fruit from smiling children would pull a trigger on their mothers? And I would be the one standing there, swallowing my rage, unable to stop it. That day, we were moving down a narrow path between two rice paddies. The ground was soft and slick from morning rain. I was third in line, scanning the horizon. The explosion was sudden and violent. The shockwave knocked me sideways. Dust and smoke blinded me. When my vision cleared, two of my men were down, their bodies torn apart. A pair of boots lay several yards away, no longer attached to anything. My ears rang so badly I thought I'd gone deaf. Everything was muted, except the pounding of my heart. We formed a defensive circle, rifles aimed in every direction. But whoever planted the mine was long gone. Back at base, the air was thick with anger and suspicion. Some swore the nearby villagers had tipped off the Viet Cong. That night, lying in my bunk, I heard voices in the dark. "Tomorrow, anyone who looks suspicious, shoot first." The rain tapped on the tin roof above me. In the darkness, I could almost see it, that thin, fragile line between protection and slaughter. And I knew even then, that the darkness had already begun to seep in. The war in Vietnam was nothing like I'd imagined. Back in the States, on the map, it was just a narrow strip of land halfway around the world. Out here, it was a daily fight with death, and the enemy didn't always show their face. Every morning we left the compound to the thump of helicopter rotors overhead, rifles on our hips, eyes scanning in every direction. A few minutes outside the gate, you could feel it, the sense of being surrounded by something unseen. Some days, gunfire cracked from deep in the jungle, echoing off itself so many times you couldn't tell where it was coming from. Other days, the sky was so quiet you almost forgot you were in a war zone, until a roadside mine shattered the silence. From a distance, the rice paddies were green and calm, but up close, the mud clung to your boots and the damp smell settled into your clothes. Every bush, every bend in the path, every abandoned hut could be hiding a rifle barrel. We learned to move slower, crouch lower, and trust nothing we saw. The longer we stayed, the more suspicion crept in. Villagers spoke less. Many just stood at a distance, watching us, their eyes silent but heavy. An old man might nod politely, but when we turned away, I still felt other eyes following us from a dark doorway. Some of the guys swore the villagers were helping the Viet Cong. As for me, I didn't know who to believe. At night, the compound felt like an island in a sea of darkness. Beyond the coils of barbed wire, insects droned and dogs barked somewhere far off. Once in a while, a few scattered shots rang out in the distance. Maybe a skirmish, maybe just someone firing into the air while drunk. Either way, it kept the whole tent awake. The conversations at the chow table had changed too. When we first arrived, we talked about family, about going home, about our kids back in the States. Now we talked about death. "Tomorrow, anyone who looks suspicious, shoot first, figure it out later," one guy said, half joking. Nobody laughed. I knew he wasn't entirely kidding. That constant, low-grade tension made everything fragile. You'd step out of the tent, take a deep breath, and wonder if this might be the last day you'd ever see. Every strange sound, every branch snapping under someone's foot, could be a warning. Then one night, after a failed ambush, we came back in silence. Faces tight, eyes forward, nobody spoke. The air reeked of sweat, mud, and gunpowder. I thought the worst part of the day was over. I was wrong. Because just a few minutes later, as we passed a row of small thatched shacks by the roadside, I heard the muffled cry of a woman, and saw the beam of a flashlight cut across the terrified face of a young girl. The flashlight beam swept across her face for only a moment, but it was enough. Her eyes were wide, the white stark against the dark, her breath coming in short, ragged bursts as if someone had stolen the air from her lungs. Her wet hair clung to her cheeks, streaked with mud. Her fingers dug into the earth, dragging deep grooves through the wet soil, as if holding onto the ground itself could keep her from being taken. Her cries were muffled under a rough, calloused hand. The squelch of mud mixed with the heavy breathing of the men crouched over her. Sweat, gunpowder, and the damp, sour smell of long-soaked earth hung thick in the air. I stepped forward fast, my heart pounding like a drum, my throat dry. "Stop!" I yelled, the word rasping but loud enough to make the group freeze and turn. A rifle barrel swung toward my chest. The flashlight's reflection slid along the steel, cold, sharp, like a blade pressed to my skin. "Back off, you want to die tonight?" The voice was low, gravelly, without the slightest hesitation. I froze. My boots felt sunk into the mud, immovable. I knew that if I took one more step, a bullet would rip through me. And I knew that if I turned my back, I'd carry this stain for the rest of my life. The next few seconds stretched on like an eternity. Heavy breaths. Boots grinding into the mud. A choked whimper. All of it blended with the first drops of rain tapping against the tin roof of a nearby shack. Then, from somewhere in the distance, a burst of gunfire ripped through the night. They let her go, not because of me but because they thought the Viet Cong might be closing in. She collapsed to the ground, shoulders shaking, hair matted over most of her face. Her eyes were hollow, stripped of every trace of light. We kept walking. No one said a word. Our boots sank deep into the mud, each step pressing the memory deeper into my mind. That was when I knew I'd lost something, not my faith in the army, my faith in humanity itself. On the way back to base, the rain drowned out most sounds, but not the gasp of breath or the terrified eyes that kept replaying in my head. Every time I blinked, I saw her hunched in the mud, small, alone, like a ghost torn from a life that should have been untouched by this war. That night I didn't sleep. Outside the rain never let up. Inside the tent, the damp crept into every seam of the canvas. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the breathing of the men around me, and realizing the darkness I'd once feared wasn't out there anymore. It was inside us. Inside me. And soon it would spill out, swallowing an entire village. The orders came on a heavy morning, the sky low and gray as if pressing down on the earth. The messenger said it plainly. A village about 10 kilometers from base was suspected of sheltering the Viet Cong. No further investigation. No warning. Just one clear command: move out. Wipe it out. We set off while the fields were still veiled in mist. Our boots pressed dark trails into the wet grass. A light breeze came through, but it wasn't enough to shake off the suffocating weight that clung to my chest. The first thatched roof came into view, and gunfire erupted. Not a few warning shots. No, this was sustained, rapid, tearing the air apart. Screams answered from every direction. Dogs barked furiously. Smoke curled through the gaps between houses, mixing with the acrid stench of burning straw, and something heavier, a smell that made my stomach twist. I sprinted down a narrow alley just in time to see a roof collapse in a shower of sparks and ash. From a doorway next to it, a small figure burst out. A little girl, maybe 8 years old, her thin arms wrapped around the limp body of a woman. Her mother, most likely. The child's face was streaked with soot, her wide eyes dry and unblinking, as if all the tears had already been burned away. I froze. My rifle slipped from my hands and hit the mud with a dull thud. The chaos roared on, gunfire, shouting, the crack of timbers giving way, but all of it seemed far away now. There was only the girl, her small fingers clutching at a blood-soaked shirt, her hollow stare cutting straight through me. Someone shouted at me to move. I barely heard them. My mind was caught on one question: what the hell are we doing here? When we finally pulled out of the village, smoke was still curling into the sky behind us, blotting out the horizon. I didn't look back. Not because I didn't want to, but because I knew, if I saw it again, I might not survive long enough to make it home. 3 months after the massacre in that village, we were redeployed to a different sector hundreds of miles away, a place where the jungle was so thick it felt like a solid wall of green. Here the enemy rarely showed themselves. But when they did, blood was always left behind. My closest friend, Mark, was still the man at my side on every mission. He was a year older than me, always talking about the Harley waiting for him back home. On quiet nights, he'd take out a photo of his mother and wipe it clean, as if afraid that even the dust of this war might somehow reach her. That day, our mission was to scout a narrow trail believed to be part of the Viet Cong's supply route. Rain had fallen all night, turning the ground slick and heavy with mud. Insects screeched so loudly it drowned out our footsteps. Mark walked a few meters ahead of me, his M16 slung across his shoulder. Then I heard it, a faint click. So soft that if you hadn't been out here long enough, you might not recognize it. But I knew. And so did Mark. He turned his head, eyes wide, not with fear, but with the understanding that it was already too late. A flash. A deafening blast ripped the air apart. His body was thrown into the mud. Dirt and smoke exploded upward, the smell of gunpowder mixing almost instantly with the sharp, metallic scent of blood. When the haze cleared, I stepped forward. In the muddy pool streaked with red, I saw a silver chain lying there, the pendant engraved with his mother's name. I picked it up, my hand trembling. War doesn't just kill people. It kills what's good in their souls. And sometimes, it kills what's good in yours too. That night, I sat alone at the edge of the hut, the chain still in my hand. The rain fell again, but this time it couldn't drown out the hollow sound in my chest. I knew I had lost a comrade. But deeper than that, I'd lost a piece of my heart I would never get back. After Mark's death, time became a blur. Days bled into each other like spliced film reels, with no clear line between yesterday and today. We still went out on patrols, still pushed through the jungle, the rice paddies, the villages. But the mission was no longer about protecting anyone or liberating anything. Each operation had become a wager, to see who would still be alive to make it back to the rally point. I began to notice my squad's faces changing day by day. Their eyes grew deeper, colder. The jokes at mealtimes disappeared. Now they spoke in short bursts, just enough to get the job done. We ate in silence, cleaned our rifles in silence, slept in silence. And sometimes, even in sleep, the sound of someone's breathing carried the sharp edge of a man trying not to scream. Once, I caught my reflection in the dull mirror hanging in the hut, and it startled me. The eyes staring back weren't mine anymore. They were the eyes of someone who'd seen too much, lost too much, and had nothing left to believe in. I no longer thought about victory. I no longer thought about the ideals I started with. Every morning, I simply asked myself, who won't come back today? And every night, I felt a little more of myself die, leaving another piece behind on this land. Letters from home still came, but I no longer opened them right away. I'd leave them in my pack for days, sometimes weeks. I was afraid of reading about a peaceful world, afraid it would feel so far away that I no longer belonged to it. I started counting down the days left in my tour. Not to celebrate, not out of hope. Just to know that someday I'd leave this place. And when I did, I could only pray I'd be taking what was left of my soul with me. After everything I'd seen, I thought I'd hit the bottom of cruelty. But war has no bottom. Every day it digs deeper and forces you to fall with no idea when, or if, you'll ever stop. The ambushes kept coming. Roadside mines still went off, tearing the legs from men I'd spoken to just the night before. Bullets still came from the shadows, slicing through leaves, through bodies bent low just to live another minute. But what chilled me most wasn't the enemy. It was what my own men did when the shooting stopped. The rapes still happened as if they were just another part of the war. Whole villages were still burned to the ground because someone thought they were sheltering the Viet Cong, even when no weapons were ever found. I remember one time we rounded up a group of villagers, women, children, and a few thin, unarmed men. It took just one soldier in my unit to say he suspected them, and the rifles went off. No warning. No questions. Just bodies falling, blood soaking into the dirt, the copper tang of it mixing with the smell of smoke. I still tried to intervene when I could, but my efforts felt like tossing a pebble into a roaring waterfall. It didn't change the flow. And every time I failed, I felt another part of myself being worn away. Day after day we woke up, slung our rifles and went out. If we met the enemy, we shot. If we didn't, we might still kill someone, out of suspicion, revenge, or simply because they were in the wrong place at the wrong time. War turns everyone into someone who can pull the trigger at any moment. I started fearing not just the enemy but my own men. Afraid that one day when I shouted stop, they wouldn't just aim their rifles to warn me anymore. As time passed, these brutal acts stopped shocking anyone. They became part of the schedule, like breakfast or cleaning your weapon. And that was the most terrifying thing of all. When you no longer feel horror, it means the darkness has taken up every inch of space in your heart. At night, I could still hear footsteps squelching through mud, muffled cries, children sobbing under gunfire. All of it blended together into a single sound that never stopped inside my head. I didn't know when I'd get to leave this place. But I knew, when I did, I wouldn't be leaving whole. The day I left Vietnam came quieter than I ever imagined. No cheers. No congratulatory handshakes. Just the low, steady roar of a helicopter waiting on the landing pad, its blades churning the air into heavy gusts. We lined up, packs on our backs, rifles slung across our chests. No one spoke. Each step felt heavier, carrying the weight of all we had seen, done, and lost. I turned to look back at the compound, the coils of barbed wire, the dull tin-roofed huts, the red dirt roads stamped deep with military tire tracks. Beyond that were the fields, the villages, the places where I had lived through the longest, darkest days of my life. Climbing into the helicopter, the rotor wash hit me full in the face, carrying the damp scent of soil and the sharp tang of burned straw. I drew in a deep breath, as if trying to memorize the air here one last time. The machine lifted, shuddering. Through the small window, the rice paddies shrank, the rooftops became tiny dots. Then everything faded into a blur of haze and dust. There was no rush of relief like I once imagined there'd be. Instead, there was a vast, cold emptiness, as if I was leaving behind not just the war but a part of myself. And I knew that part would never return. It would remain here forever, somewhere in a blood-soaked field, in the hollow eyes of a child, or beneath the rain-slicked tin roof of a broken shack. On that flight, no one said a word. There was only the engine's growl, the wind's push, and the steady, unending beat of memory inside my head. The plane touched down at a military base in the US in the afternoon. The sky was clear and blue, the sunlight warm, as if there had never been a place filled with mud and gunfire. My family waited behind the fence, eyes red. My mother threw her arms around me, her hands trembling but her embrace tight, as if afraid I might vanish again. Neighbors shook my hand, smiling, saying, "You're home now. It's over." I smiled, nodded, said the words they wanted to hear. But inside, I didn't feel like I was home at all. A part of me was still on the other side of the world, in the wet fields and under the gunfire echoing through the night. In the first days, I tried to live like before, having dinner with my family, walking through town, hearing the laughter of children. But at night, my bedroom turned into a battlefield. I heard footsteps splashing through rain, the muffled cries of a woman being silenced, the scream of a child as a roof caved in. It all felt like it was happening just outside my window. I began waking in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat, my heart pounding out of control. I told no one. Not because I feared they wouldn't believe me, but because I knew they could never understand. How could they? The only war they'd ever known came through a television screen. By day, I worked trying to keep myself busy. But the images always found their way in. In the whir of a drill at a construction site, I heard gunfire. In the smell of burning wood, I caught the scent of straw and blood. I began to realize I hadn't really left Vietnam. I'd only brought it back with me, in my head, in my heart, and in dreams with no way out. Years passed after I left Vietnam, but the war never left me. Every night, I dreamed the same dream. Mud up to my ankles, rain pounding on a tin roof, muffled cries, and sudden bursts of gunfire tearing the night apart. I saw the face of the woman dragged into the mud, the wide, frozen eyes of the child clutching her dead mother, the silver chain stained with blood in my hand. Daylight didn't free me from it. A slamming door, the sudden roar of an engine. Either one could make my heart jump and my body tense, reacting as if under attack. I could be sitting on my porch with a cup of coffee, but my mind would be back in the flooded fields of central Vietnam. The memories of rape and killing never faded. They clung to me as if to remind me that I was there, that I saw it, and that I couldn't stop it. That feeling of helplessness, it wasn't fear and it wasn't ordinary regret. It was like a slow, deep crack inside me, one I couldn't touch but could always feel. It took decades before I found the words for it. Moral injury. That's when you witness or take part in something that shatters every value and belief you once lived by, and you are powerless to stop it. You don't just lose faith in your cause or your unit. You lose faith in humanity itself. and sometimes in yourself. Most people think what I brought back from Vietnam was PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. PTSD is fear, nightmares, the overreactions to triggers that remind you of the past. But moral injury is different. It's not fear. It's the weight of knowing that what you saw or what you did can never be undone. For me, it wasn't only the horrific images. It was living on, knowing I had existed in a world where people could strip each other of all humanity, and I stood there powerless watching it happen. Now, when someone asks me, "What did you leave behind in Vietnam?" I just smile. I left more than my youth. I left my faith and a piece of my soul that I will never get back. If you've never stood in the middle of a war, I hope you never have to know what it feels like. Because war doesn't end when the guns fall silent. It keeps living, in the mind, in the heart, and in every quiet moment of those who walked out of it alive. Many people think war is a chapter you can close. But for us, it's more like a wound that never heals. You can keep living, you can smile, you can work, but all it takes is the smell of smoke, the sudden crack of a sound, or an unexpected moment, and it all comes rushing back as vivid as the first day. I've spent a lifetime trying to find reasons, telling myself I did what had to be done. But the more I think about it, the more I know that some things can never be justified. They simply exist, like shadows that stretch alongside every step you take. If you ask me what war taught me, I'll tell you this. It taught me that a human being can lose their humanity far faster than you'd ever believe. And once it's gone, there's no easy way to get it back. I've met many other veterans, each carrying a different shard of memory, but all of them share the same look in their eyes. The look of someone who has stood in a place where the world collapsed right in front of them. No one truly comes back whole. Now, every morning, I sit on my porch, hands trembling around a cup of coffee, eyes fixed on the peaceful field in front of me. People say I'm lucky to be alive, but sometimes, I'm not sure I've really lived since the day I left Vietnam. For me, the war still explodes every night. If this story made you stop and think, leave a comment. I want to know how you feel, and whether you believe a war can ever truly end.